Jim. That's in chair.
Okay, I'm trying to lacerate my mouth. Okay, welcome members and anyone who's watching to the 85th meeting of the Committee for Finance in the 22 to 27 mandate. As always, this is recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings online. Usual rules apply regarding phones. Agenda item 1 is apologies. Jerry Carroll has sent his apologies. The Deputy Chair, Diane Forsyth, will be a little late. One member, Gemma, is attending over Zoom. Agenda item 2, declaration of interests. Members are obliged to declare any relevant interests, financial or otherwise, at the start of each meeting. Does anybody have an interest they want to declare? No. No, Chair. Right. No, is that no? So 3 is next estate strategy, oral briefing. So members, at page 6 of the meeting pack, there's a clerk's memo in the oral briefing from the department. Papers provided also include the latest progress report from the Department of Finance, the next estate strategy, which is at page 27 of the meeting pack, the next office estate strategy at page 27 of the meeting pack, the next office estate strategy progress report, which was from just last week or the week before last, the 16th of May 2025. No, sorry, that's from the 2025 progress report, various DALO readout responses in relation to how the Strategic Asset Management Unit interacts with the next office estate strategy. So we have in front of us Desi McDonald, who is Director of Properties Division, Tracy Flanagan, who's Director of Valuation and Commissioner of Valuation and Appeals at LPS, Niall Hobbs, who is Deputy Director of Properties Division and Head of Office Estates, and Neil McCall, who's District Value. You're all very welcome. Thank you for coming to see us. Desi, would you give us an opening statement, please? And members, as always, indicate should you wish to ask questions.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to update the committee on the NICS Office Estate Strategy. As you say, I'm joined by my colleagues Tracy, Niall and Neil. Members should have received, hopefully you have received, the second progress report on the estate strategy. It might be useful if I give you a very brief overview. The draft Office Estate Strategy was produced in June 2024, published in February 2025 following consultation. The draft strategy was shared with the committee in October 2024. The first review of the strategy was presented to committee last May and outlined progress towards the key performance indicators over the first 12 months. These were baselined against property and accommodation data for the year ending March 2022 and are all for achievement by the 31st of March 2028. When the strategy was drafted, the NICS office estate consisted of 99 buildings, including 33 JBOs. And those are used exclusively for the Department for Communities and have been out of scope for the strategy and review. This is because the locations of the JBOs and our ability to consolidate these can only be determined by DFC. We are currently working in parallel with DFC on their future accommodation needs in this area too. The in-scope estate, therefore, that's reviewed to in the strategy document and in the progress report relates to the 66 offices as were in the strategy that are across the region. And this second review is for the period up to the 31st of March, just past there in 26. Our headline is that the department is on track to achieve 4 of the 6 KPIs by 2028. And again, that's against the property and accommodation baseline for ending the 31st of March 2022. You probably want me to focus first on the KPIs that are not marked green. We do reprofile and consider the progress on an ongoing basis towards the KPIs, and we believe that the divestment of a number of fairly sizable buildings that were initially included in stage 1 will now happen beyond the 31st of March 2028. This is what has affected RAG statuses of both KPI 1 and KPI 2. We do believe that we will achieve the other 4 KPIs. In the coming 12 months, there are a number of priorities to continue to progress this first phase of the strategy. We will divest 4 further sites to further reduce the in-scope estate by around 16,000 square metres. The committee will be aware that Fermanagh House was already sold on the 2nd of April. On the Stormont estate, we're going to proceed with a number of demolitions, hopefully the demolitions of the annex and bungalow, the Stormont House, and there are a number of other demolitions of other unused structures on the estate that we would hope to demolish in the coming year. Now, the primary focus to date, as you know, has been on delivering the Phase 1 to achieve a leaner estate, and that is being achieved through a programme of divestments. In what will be year 3, there will be increased focus on activities to support the next phase of the strategy, which is to modernise the office estate. And in this sense, we have already made major investment in Orchard House and Derry. Next, there's work already ongoing, which will result in OMA having our first regional net zero signature building. This will also provide a learning opportunity and provide the blueprint for moving forward towards a greener, modern office estate environment. And further investment will be planned for Ballymena and Coleraine. As well as improving energy performance, the Phase 2 work will support the wider public sector's climate action. And in this sense, approval has already been secured for our flagship sustainability project on the Stormont estate. You might recall a 400 kVA solar photovoltaic array, easy for me to say. We appointed design consultants late in 2025, and while the planning time scales are likely to be challenging, the solar farm will supply clean renewable energy to the whole estate and reduce our reliance on grid electricity and will help cut emissions over the longer term. Over the next 12 months, we also plan to procure a carbon footprinting exercise for the retained estate. So in concluding my opening remarks, I think the committee will be interested to know that both ourselves and LPS have met with the Northern Ireland Audit Office. They have included the central government estate in the Audit Office's public reporting programme for 2026-27. We haven't yet received the commissioning letter, but we await that, and hopefully we'll get some idea of the outline of the scope for the audit at that point. We're happy to help with any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much, Desi. Appreciate that. Members, again, submit questions. You don't have to submit them, but we're not going to triage them. Just indicate if you want to ask a question. A few from me to start. So I suppose at a kind of first glance, there's more green than red or amber, and given that we sometimes give officials and ministers a hard time for lack of delivery, that's broadly welcome. The one that is red is around the reducing the overall square footage by, I think it's 42%, or the square footage is the wrong way of putting it. Effectively the workstations, the area that's being deployed for workstations and all of that. You're only at about 19%. What's happened there?
Well, KPI 2 is the one you're talking about, and it's a reduction, you're quite correct, 42.7% in net internal area. It is square metres, square feet, whatever you wanted to. Do you want to try and calculate that in square feet?
Multiply by 10.7.
Multiply by 10. So it'll be about 2.5 million square feet, I think. Yeah. At the 31st of March, progress, as you said, was around 19%. Now, the estate profile and progress, as I said before, we would look into it on an ongoing basis, and it's the divestment of a number of sizeable buildings that we initially included for delivery in stage 1 are now likely to take place after the 31st of March. It's affected the RAG status of KPI 1 and KPI 2. Obviously KPI 2's red, KPI 1's amber. Now the primary reason for that, you'll not be surprised to hear, is that we included Dundonald House in the Phase 1 to be delivered by the 31st of March 2028. And on its own, Dundonald House contributes about 13% to the overall achievement. It's highly, highly unlikely we're going to have anything done with Dundonald House between now and the 31st of March 2028. You never know, but it's unlikely. The other things, really, there's a number of other issues that are going on. After we did the business case assessment in Ballymena, we changed what had been our initial track on that. We had thought we would be using Ballymena County Hall for the staff in the Ballymena area, but we having worked through the business case, worked through the numbers, we can actually use Academy House instead. Now, the downside to using Academy House is it's going to take us beyond the 31st of March, but the upside is it'll allow us to divest of the county hall, which obviously in terms of capital receipts, which will be much more significant than Academy House would have been, and will also give us a much greater reduction in running costs. I think the figure's somewhere around 900,000 versus 300,000, so it's 3 times the savings per annum. The other one that you probably will want to know about in particular is we may not now bring College Street to the market.
Okay.
As we had initially planned. It may be repurposed for another accommodation request that we received not too long ago, and we've been reassessing it. So all of those have been sort of excluded from where we think we are going to get to. That's why basically
Primarily
the
College
ink is
Street.
red.
So if you're 19%, had Dundonald House been able to be divested in a way that meant it was properly divested, i.e., sold or demolished. There's listings issue there. That would have been you would have got you to over 30%. And then
Yeah, at this point, looking at what we are planning to do, we believe that the achievement is more likely to be in the region of 30%. Now, the divestments is amber. The reason it's amber and not red is because we're already on 29%. On that, we are hopeful that KPI 1 can still be achieved. I know it maybe seems a bit odd that the number of buildings can still be achieved, but the overall space in that internal area wouldn't be achieved. But the reason for that is the significant size of Dundonald House. I say it's 13%. We think at this point that the NIA reduction would be likely somewhere around 30%, whereas the divestments we believe will be 39%, and there are always sort of tactical things that happen, so we're sort of more confident, but we thought it better just to be upfront about it now.
We would rather you're upfront, and that brings us on, I suppose, to Dundonald House. So, I suppose we know now, and there's no gotcha involved, that's going to be the net internal area target is going to be harder to hit because you're basically taking effectively Dundonald House out. These numbers don't include Fermanagh House, which is
Fermanagh House has just been
just
sold,
gone, so it's not in your
it's in this year rather than last year.
Yeah, and do we know what, just out of interest, what the percentage is in terms of, it won't be as big obviously as Dundonald House, but
Fermanagh House is quite small, isn't it?
I think it was about 2,000 odd square metres, and just,
Okay.
I mean, Dundonald House is 14,500 square metres.
Okay.
It's the single biggest building that we have in terms of scale. So
that brings me on to Dundonald House. So what is the situation then with Dundonald House? It was ceased to be. I've now been an MLA long enough that I had meetings in Dundonald House when it was still a function with permanent secretaries, when it was still a functioning civil service office building. But it was, I think 2023, it had to be, people had to be decanted because of falling masonry. It's effectively been vacant for the past 3 years. What is the status and what is the plan?
Dundonald House at this point in time has been closed. So it's closed up. All services and amenities into that building that are specific to that building have been ceased. Now, there are still some things in that building that affect the rest of the estate. I think there's some power, there's pumps as well.
Street lighting and submersible
so
drainage.
there's some things that have to be maintained, but otherwise all the services have been halted. Because it's listed, it's zero rated. So in effect, we aren't spending anything on just on Dundonald House. Now, we all know that while it's secured as far as we can secure it, as far as it's practical for us, it will remain a liability. It will continue to deteriorate. Now, the committee, I'm not sure if the committee's aware, but I think we had the conversation before about the investment that would be required in Dundonald House to bring it up to modern standards. And the figures we have are 100 million plus. Now that includes contingencies and optimism bias and all the things that you usually put in to a project at this stage, but that's the sort of quantum we're talking about. We're talking about upwards of 100 million. Now, the other side of this coin is we don't need it, so it's surplus to requirements certainly something on that scale, and certainly something on that scale in that location. Now, the Finance Minister and the Communities Minister have corresponded and agreed that we would meet, officials from DOF would meet with our colleagues in DFC to consider whether there were potential ways forward for Dundonald House. Now, we have shared some further studies on the building to allow DFC colleagues to review further and bring forward any sort of additional considerations or proposals that they might have. Now, we have also, following that meeting, we've been taking advice to explore. You may recall back into the history of this, under Workplace 2010, that part of the estate was actually going to be passed into private sector hands. And I don't know if anyone here remember the debates at the time, but the debates in the time went into security issues. Now, the security issues were got around because it would only be civil servants who would continue to use, even though the building would be passed to the private sector and leased back at that time under the plans, the security issues were not extant because it would have been civil servants that would have been using, continuing to use the building. So we have been speaking to colleagues in the Security Advisory Unit and TEO and the PSNI, and they've taken some advice as well from National Protective Security Authority. And unless we go into camera, I suppose I can't really discuss what they've told me. It's entirely up to yourselves.
Okay.
But what we're trying to do is to create options
would
to
be
see
for-
what
yeah.
the security issues would be if it passed into private ownership.
Okay. Right. Well, it may be useful for us at some point, possibly at the end of this session, to go into closed session rather than disrupt our evidence now. If members are content, if we do want to go into closed, just to get that. But I suppose what I'm interested in is, are you saying that there's really no way of giving this? I mean, this is not a going concern really as a building for any potential private sector or even like a social housing provider, a hotelier. There's already a big hotel in Newton Arch Road, so it's probably, who knows if that's a commercially viable option. One would think housing, either social or social affordable or just market rate, or I presume there's not going to be a market for other grade A office space in that part of Belfast. But I mean, is there any other viable use basically for this building before we even get on to security and cost of
The
transition?
the other viable use that was explored a number of years ago was for housing, and it showed basically that the scale of investment that would be required to make it workable as housing would also be an issue for anybody that took it on. The initial plan and the reason why it was included in the strategy was that under Nix's plans, it would have been demolished in their initial plans that they brought through at the beginning. The problem being that they weren't going to get planning permission, basically, if that was included.
Because the demolition of the
so
building.
the demolition was removed from their plans. I can't see that there would be any alternative use for the building. And the security issue I talk about is that if there is a security issue, there's no point looking for alternative private sector usage because the security issues would outweigh potentially what the building could be used for.
I mean, suppose if this building stays listed in the way it is, are we saying that there's not really any particular other option other than it kind of languishing there because it's so expensive to turn it back into viable office space? It's so expensive to turn it into. I mean, I'm sort of thinking about how you how you could possibly create some kind of, I don't know, special purpose vehicle to take on a liability that is accounted for in a certain way, and you have to build a certain number of homes, and I don't know, you could construct things in your head, but if you're talking about 100 million for any purpose, that's an extraordinary liability to take on. It just seems an impossibility that it's going to do anything other than slowly rot and possibly cope.
What we are looking at is if there is some other way around the listing, in effect.
Delisting?
I don't know if that's viable. Our minister did raise this with the Communities Minister, that this was something that he would ultimately maybe want to bring to the executive if we can't find a solution for the building. Obviously, we don't want that sitting there for the next, becoming the courthouse in the Crumlin Road all over again.
Well, exactly.
So we want to find some solution to this. So, but as it stands, we can't really identify. I can't identify any alternative usage to that building that would be affordable.
Why did it get into that state, if you pardon me? I mean, like, as in, should it not have been? I'm just genuinely asking your opinion. At some point earlier on in the process, should we collectively, the civil service, the machine here, have identified this as a potential
Niall goes back further than me, but when I first came into...
Don't worry, I'm not trying to say you're the person responsible.
No, and I would. I've been
Yeah.
around long enough
Yeah.
to take the blame for anything you want to blame me for.
Don't worry about that.
I've been in since 2014, but when I came in 2014, they were talking about, and you probably predate me, they were talking about doing some work to Dundonald House to bring it up to standard. The problem has always been the sheer scale.
Yeah.
You know, you can write a business case, but it still has to be affordable.
Yeah.
You know, and affordability's always been an issue with that
And
building.
you create the bigger cost of, dealing with it,
When
or
you're talking about that sort of money, and you guys are looking what that sort of money could be used elsewhere
course, yeah.
on.
But at the minute, to make it basically office space again would be about 100 million.
And that's not going to give you a net zero building.
Even that is not going to give you up to. Okay, right. We'll move on to that business. Just Connect Hubs.
Yeah.
What's the latest on Connect Hubs? Are we? I mean, it was something that I think lots of us liked the idea of and saw it as something really important, particularly around the time of COVID, and including getting people doing good civil service jobs in Omagh, Downpatrick, Ballycally. What's the status? Take up is still low, basically.
The take up is it's in the 20s.
Last data was up just in the low 30s, low to mid 30s, so it had gone up slightly.
It has gone up slightly. Okay.
It's
So
gone
from
up
your
slightly.
report says 17 to 19%.
Right, through the
It's
chair.
gone up to 30. Sorry, Chair. Yeah.
Was that not just in
The one-
particular ones? That
Yeah.
wasn't across the average. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it generally has stayed in and around that mid 20s. There was a seventh hub in Orchard House in Derry. So our plan is anywhere where we're doing works, we will try and incorporate a Connect2 hub in, rather than just going out and moving people out of an office and putting
But it is below what the original projection was in terms of take up. They're still sitting below where you had projected it would be.
Yeah, there are reasons for that. Obviously, a lot more people are capable of working from home than was the idea at the time when the Connect2s were brought in. They were brought in as an occasional opportunity for people not to be having to travel into the office. But what we have
Belfast itself.
Well, what we have found is that more people obviously can work from home now, and why would you travel to an office, and even if it is nearby, rather than work from home?
I suppose part of it would be, and part of the policy was around the high street and supporting the high street in Ballycally, well, not so much of a high street in Ballycally, but Omagh or whatever. I wonder, it might be something we took up in our civil service inquiry, whether there's been any look at kind of productivity, and the civil service looks at productivity at home. Not that people aren't productive at home, they certainly are. I certainly am often much more productive at home than I am in this building, I would say, in terms of getting through lots of work and research. But whether there's been any study of that might be interesting, but it might not be one for your desk. A couple of quick ones for me, I'll bring in others. In relation to LPS, now there's been this persistent question, the Deputy Chair may want to touch on it later on, she's just in, but in relation to the valuation, and one question we've had, and this is not to diminish the very excellent valuation abilities of LPS, but there's no easy way of asking this with LPS colleagues in front of you thinking that you're insulting them, which we're not, but why use LPS valuations rather than, for example, a commercial valuer? Because there has been a little bit of a question there about the initial LPS valuations, which have often come down a little bit based on when you've got to the final transactions.
Mm-hmm. You're asking?
I'm asking you, any of you?
Yeah.
Well, I think we're required to use LPS.
You're required to.
Yes. Like, departments are required to use LPS to source their valuations.
Okay.
So as RICS registered valuers, we as an organisation are an RICS effectively sponsored firm.
Yeah.
In broader terms. We use a range of assumptions.
Yep.
The definition of how we value a property is the definition's open market value, and that's specified in the RICS Red Book. It's a valuation at a point in time, and it's based on critical assumptions, and they can't predict variable factors that are in the open market, such as, funding conditions, abnormal costs, other due diligence issues that arise during the course of that valuation. The true test of what a property is worth is when you put it on the open market, because ultimately it is worth what somebody is prepared to pay for it, and the best way of assessing that is through exposure to the open market and competitive bidding, if that is the situation that arises. The market has changed, and I believe that there have been briefings brought to committee previously just in relation to the detail more around this, but there's supply and demand factors, there are property characteristics, and the open market will take account of all of those various factors. That figure that is achieved on a sale price is often quite a considerable period of time after a valuation has been undertaken. In some instances, and I know we have provided information around the sales that have been undertaken, for instance, we will provide a valuation to a department, but we may not necessarily be then subsequently involved in the negotiation of the sale or the disposal.
Okay.
And that would explain some of the variations, because sometimes things are sold, and I can give a couple of examples if that helps.
Yes, please.
So, for instance, let me just get these. We have Ballyclare Police Station is a good example. The market valuation that was undertaken by LPS was 475,000 and ultimately sold for 240. So on the face of that valuation at a point in time.
Apologies, declaration of interest, my constituency, and might have been involved with that. So I just want to make that declaration now.
Noted. Thank you. Go ahead.
We proceed. So the differentiation market value between that and the Red Book was driven over a period of time, and largely due to lack of demand once the property was put on the open market, despite the fact that the property had potential for residential development. The market ultimately determined that there was an increased risk and some blight associated with the PSNI retaining a portion of the site for a compound, which was to be used for a telecommunications mast, and that was for essential emergency telecom coverage. So when the property was exposed to the market, those issues raised their head, and the market bid, and obviously the price was lower than what we had assessed. But again, those are market-specific factors. Another one is land at Jamaica Road in Belfast.
Yes, yeah.
This is one where we valued at 35,000, and it was transferred by the council at a pound. So we weren't involved in the disposal there, but ultimately what the council decided to do was dispose on a long leasehold basis, subject to some restrictive covenants. So there's other ones as well where we have exposed something to the market, and Castledurg PSNI station's another example, where the valuation was 350,000, but we had Lidl in the market who were looking for a site, and there was no alternative sites, and that sold for 1.17 million. So there are, it's an estimate at a point in time.
I suppose that then the question would be, and again, it's no slight, extreme, full of praise for the professionalism of staff and LPS. Would you say though that if it was a commercial value, they might have a bit more? Would there be an argument for, perhaps in addition, if there's a legal requirement to consult or to use LPS as your primary valuer, could consulting commercial valuers give an insight in that, well, now is not necessarily the time to put this building on the market because they know what the other things that, Belfast's not a big city, North's not a big region. It's a question in terms of whether the disposal strategy would be perhaps like some form of engagement with the market via commercial valuers might help too.
Yeah. No, we do engage. Okay. There's a framework agreement in place, but also, the example, that was probably best illustrated at this point is we have not brought College Street to the market. Okay. Because you run the risk of flooding the market with a lot of buildings, and you have a limited pot of people who are in a position to purchase them. Okay. So we do take that advice. We are, in touch with our commercial colleagues in the private sector.
Okay. Going to bring in others now. Dr. Steve Aiken.
Yeah, thanks very much, Steve. Just a couple of questions. Just to pick on a few points. The Connect 2 hubs are being used, 30% of the time? And in your documentation, you're saying people are working from home 60% of the time. So have we reviewed the size of the estate we actually need if people are working from home 60% of the time and we're only using the hubs 30% of the time? Is the estate, when was the last time we reviewed the size of the estate to fit that? And bearing in mind, we've already had, I think it was last week, we have evidence from the head of the Northern Ireland Civil Service, and she was talking about integrate and how that was going to change everything, and digitisation, and how the workforce was going to be more flexible and all the rest of it. Yeah. Yet we seem to be looking at a policy here that was like umpteen years ago, and we're sort of lagging behind where the rest of the civil service is.
It's a very fair point. In the strategy, there is a review built in, which should be happening right now.
Yeah.
Our grade 3 has just left, and there's a new grade 3 coming in. So part of his task will be exactly that, to look at this and to re-look at where we go into the future. So I think it is a very good point.
Yeah, because it just seems to be reading that, looking at the size of the estate, the underutilage of the hubs, but more and more people working from home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you were looking at sort of it would be interesting to look at the data, but who's actually using the offices we've actually got?
Yeah, when we set out, now we would our design is around a 50% average across the estate, so that's where you would be getting into sort of central London territory if you're going below that into 20s, or sorry, some of them are in 20s, but into 30s or 40s. I think that when we started off, it was 64% usage on any day, but the problem being that it could be just somebody who's off ill or somebody's not in, and it's spread right across the estate. But I do take your point. I think it'll be a very useful thing to take a look at this again and just see what that usage data is telling us. The problem is getting good usage data as much as anything else.
As we had the sense from sort of when talking to the head of the NICS, is one of the things that they're not quite over the whole sort of workforce planning model. And they said there was lots of stovepipes, so they're trying to get around stovepipes. But yet you're trying to create a structure. It's not your fault, but you're trying to create a structure that matches the need. Yeah. And you've got a need that's changing all the time.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that's second one is Stormont House. Did I hear somebody say you're going to knock down?
No, we're not knocking down Stormont House.
No, but
there's a couple of attachments to Stormont House. There's an annex and an old bungalow, which I don't know how they got them attached to a listed building when they did it, but either way, those are there, and it would be to remove those from Stormont House.
Yeah, but the annex is fully fitted out with all modern government communications and all sorts of stuff.
It's not fitted out with anything now.
It's been cleared out completely?
It has been completely cleared out, and it's been vacant for a number of years.
I think when the NIO went.
So they stripped the whole thing out and then turned it into okay, that's fine. Well, knock it down then. And then I've just got no architectural merit whatsoever. Yeah. And the third one was, have we ever tried putting sort of Dundonald House in the market to see how much it's actually worth?
No, we haven't.
Why not?
Because we can't sell it. The 1933 Stormont Act would prevent us from selling. We would have to create legislation. Now there was
what we're here for.
There was legislation created in 2006, which was the bill, wasn't it? It was the 2006 order, which would have allowed just what we were talking about earlier on under Workplace 2010, for it to pass to the private sector. But that was all very controlled in that it would have been civil service use. As I said earlier, there are security implications associated with this, so it would be an interesting way. I without saying anything that I shouldn't say, you would probably be a significant redrawing of boundaries around the estate.
Yeah, but just thinking that, because we're looking at sort of what's £323 per square metres, looking at sort of normal office space around Belfast. Yeah. And sort of one of the things that we're having difficulty doing is sufficient grade A office space for availability. But, you know, if you mention the word £100 million to change it, everybody will go, oh, not going to do it. But I would imagine a private contractor doing that, who had the opportunity of doing that, would not be spending £100 million on it. You can knock it down and rebuild 3 of them for that cost.
Yeah, which is what
what I'm saying is it's listed, but there are ways around it. But by using, I just wanted to know if anybody had actually thought, why don't we ask the commercial part?
That is Workplace 2010, that's exact. But it was being leased back into government.
Okay.
So that was what would have happened. The Dundonald House would have passed into the private sector. And the 2006 order was created to allow that to happen. but it never took forward. I think the market collapsed at the point in time, and it just fell.
Just give it to the Belfast Harbour
Commission.
Commissioners,
Effectively
they can
go
do
into private. That was the plan back. in
That was
2
the plan going back
Yeah,
20 years.
Basically, it was a sale and lease back, but the problem was the 2008 property crash intervened, and the valuation of what was going to go out then, there wasn't enough money to make it work for the two bidders that were left, because really, whilst their apartment was leasing back, part of it was the accommodation that was being kept would have been fully renovated, like Dundonald House, like so. And there wasn't enough money really to make it work at that point with the property crash. So
It would be an interesting sort of thought experiment, because we have sort of pondered this on occasion, and the scale of Dundonald House would basically mean that every civil servant in Belfast would nearly need to work out there to make the business case stack up.
They're all working from the same site. Yeah, are they? Yeah. There are no stovepipes there if you're all in the same building. Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Chair.
No economic boost for the city centre and for the shops.
The
and
complete
cafes and
opposite
pubs.
of the, I think.
Which is, anyway, right. Brian Kingston.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your information so far. There's quite a severe reduction in the physical estate. What are the primary drivers of it?
Well, one of the primary drivers from I have been in Properties Division has been cost. One of the first presentations I got when I arrived in 2014 was basically we were spending around 55, 60 million of our hard-earned money, ratepayers' money at that time on the estate, and we were told that if we didn't get the estate sort of into a better shape, we would be at 120 million a year within a few years. So that has been a driver. Obviously the quality of a lot of we've got has been allowed to deteriorate over a long time. So there's also the drive to try and improve the estate for the staff that work in it. And of course now we're into the energy savings as well. So a lot of what we got or what we have would be quite difficult and quite expensive to make net zero ready.
But in terms of people, has there been a corresponding reduction in civil servants? Or is it primarily about home working? Or
Do you mean the people that are working in the estate?
just the disposal of 40% of the
Yeah,
estate?
there's about two sides. There are two sides to it. The estate was too big to start off with. As I say, I think there was about 64% usage on any average day, which was
Going back, pre-COVID?
Pre-COVID, yeah. This is back into when we started looking at this. After as well as that, then there was also the problem that it was spread right across. It wasn't just one building wasn't used here, or one building wasn't used there. So it was trying to consolidate things in together and to make the estate more right-sized at the time. COVID intervened. People working practices changed, and people are working in a more hybrid way now. Some days in the office, some days not in the office. So obviously driven by that, the opportunities, as Mr. Aiken said, that are there if we re-explore that are probably great.
And right, so the buildings were never fully occupied or even close to it. It was only they were only 2/3 occupied.
As I say, it was spread
or was the civil
across
service
the
larger
estate.
at one stage?
I genuinely don't know why we had such a large estate, but it wasn't necessary. I think it was probably just it had developed over time that if you set up a new unit, they get a new building or something like that, rather than squeeze them in somewhere else.
There are always inefficiencies because the match is never perfect. You have different groups of staff of different size, and the building plates are a certain size. So you're going, well, I can't fit that into that. I can't fit that into that. So you got a little bit of almost spreading out, and then you got areas that were slightly hollowed out. But that, we always used to use the phrase like a Swiss cheese. So you have desks here, 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 here. Well, that's no good because you need to try and actively consolidate it and move other people in. That was hard to do. So that was one of the reasons. So in terms of the number of workstations and the number of people allocated, there would have been spare workstations. But added into that, you also had the issue, I think we were about 20% on those metrics. The spare workstations used to be about 20% across the estate going back. But then added on to that was the people aren't in every day. People are on leave, people are sick, people are on site depending on the work. So you add those two things in, as he was saying, when we actually did measurement, and that was based on login data, I think at the time, that you were able to see that on any day, the average was about 64%. That meant some days there was more, a lot more than that, potentially some days there was less than that.
I think the other point, just used the word workstations.
Yes.
When I started in civil service, there weren't workstations, everybody had a desk.
Yes.
And we didn't have much that was open planned. It was, once you got to a certain rank, you got your own office. You're nodding your head there. And I think that probably contributed to as well, because when Workplace 2010 and the drive for those sort of space economies, it was more about open planning, but the workstation had changed. So you have workstations, you'll all have seen them like this now, rather than everybody having their individual desks. 1800 millimeter desks, and you know, they were quite sizable desks that everybody had. So I think that's part of the reason why. It's just as well, it's a social thing as much as anything else. It's just the way society's changed.
Yeah. Okay, well, in the current day, my concern is to what extent we are normalising homeworking, and I'm not against homeworking. We all work at home, especially in our line of work. You work probably too much at home, but in terms of the message about not having to come into the office, you know, are we getting to the stage where staff rarely have to come into the office? Because whilst I accept the value of homeworking, there's also an extra value in meeting with colleagues, you know, in having face-to-face meetings, just in sharing information, brainstorming, and I think it's important that the opportunity to physically meet, you know, is not lost through a drive for reduction in premises costs.
I totally agree with you. At the last issue of the work style agreements, everyone is supposed to be in a minimum of 2 days a week. Senior staff are encouraged to be in 3 days a week. As you know, that can be even more because it's difficult sometimes. Just exactly what you explain, meetings and collaborating with people. So I don't disagree with that. We have an estate that is adequate and more than adequate for the working practices of the civil service now, and will be more than adequate once we streamline it further.
Okay. Other short questions. Divestment, does that mean sale or demolition?
Or lease end.
Or leasing?
Yeah, or lease end, ending a lease.
Ending a lease where we're renting a building?
Yeah.
And so at the option of retaining a building to rent it out, that's not seen as what either desirable or not viable because of the state of the buildings, or?
It's probably that we aren't a private landlord. We don't have that sort of expertise, so it would be an entirely new departure for us. I think we have on occasion acted almost as a private landlord.
Yes, we have had one or two instances where we've had private sector, that was really buildings that were purchased with the private sector already in them, and we became, there are complicating issues around the management of that, but I mean ultimately, are we interested in crowding out the private sector? Well, we're not, to be blunt. I mean, why would we? There are plus points and minus points to being a landlord. In business tenancy sits there and protects a tenant in terms of what you want to do with a building if you have a tenant in there with the lease. So that's a complicating issue that we normally don't have if we're just working within government. So it makes the estate planning a lot more difficult if you're going to try and do that sort of stuff. So.
Okay. Well, I noticed you spoke earlier about PSNI stations. So do you only deal with civil service buildings or accommodation, or do you deal with any of the arm's length bodies? Are there opportunities for savings to the public purse for including arm's length bodies?
There are some arm's length bodies in some of our accommodation, but generally we provide accommodation for the centrals for the civil service, and some of the departments may wish to share space with their ALBs. So it's usually like that rather than us accommodating ALBs.
That
direct.
can happen. That
Oh, yeah.
happens
It,
in-
it can happen, it does happen, as he says.
good.
We have ALBs in a number of our buildings.
Okay, no, that's good. And I think you implied this earlier to answer to Steve. Within Stormont estate itself, the option of having like a company located within there is difficult. What, just due to for security reasons, the fact that
Well-
it's civil service protected land as such, or?
There are legal reasons we can't lease
On the- yeah,
on
on the-
the
on the
Stormont estate under the 1933
Act.
Or
Stormont Act.
sell?
Yeah.
then?
Or sell, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, it's,
So we'd have to create legislation to allow us to do that.
okay. Just to clarify again on the police stations issue, I've sometimes had issue with PSNI estates.
We don't deal with police station issues at all. We don't have any police stations. We're talking about PSNI in context of a security issue that we were discussing. So, no, we don't deal with the
Right,
police
right.
estate. They have their own estates.
Yes, well, I know that. Just have to take the issues up with them directly. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Gemma Dolan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here for your presentation. As all politics is local, could I just ask about or ask for an update on the sale of Castle Barracks in Enniskillen?
You want to?
Yes, certainly. Castle Barracks has gone through the D1 process, and as part of the stage 1 of the D1, the Department for Communities indicated that they wished to acquire, so we have selected them as the preferred receiver of the property, and they are currently going forward with their business case, and we expect that to complete within 6 months. So the Department for Communities will acquire Castle Barracks. I think they have, those colleagues who speak to that, but I think they have some ambitious plans for how that could work and how that site could be reinvigorated. So.
Okay, that sounds exciting. I just know that it was a number of years ago. It was when John O'Dowd was actually infrastructure minister. There were issues with the heating and stuff in that Castle Barracks. So would it be fixed and then sold, or is that up to DFC now to fix that?
Building is sold as seen.
Okay. And the less said about that, the better. No, that's all I wanted to ask. Thank you very much.
Hi, Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Saul. You'd mentioned the carbon footprint on the whole estate. I mean, are you assessing?
That's what we're procuring this year, is to get a carbon footprint assessment.
Baseline exercise.
The baseline exercise will tell us basically which buildings we can net zero and which maybe are going to be more problematic in that sense. To date, we have our reductions in terms of energy usage has been delivered by the divestments, but we also, when we get the opportunity, would do some works in buildings to reduce energy usage as well, light bulbs and all that sort of things.
We've already done a lot of stuff.
But I think we've sort of reached the point where there's not very much more we could do in that sense. But as I say, it's largely delivered by the divestments.
And see where you're at, and then the plan after that. What?
That's the next stage. The next stage is very much the modernisation of the estate and looking forward and how we're going to deliver that.
Okay. I know the bungalow's been mentioned on Stormont Estate or the annex or whatever, but why take it down? What's the?
Just to clear the site.
Well, again, there was a business case that looked at the options. That was put up in the 1970s. So, for example, it's at end of life. The curtain walling was all at end of life. You'd have to replace all the curtain walling. The roof was at end of life. All the building systems were at end of life. You'd have to strip it right back to the frame and rebuild it. So that's a big cost intervention for space you don't actually need. So
No, makes no
Triggers
sense.
broom. It'll be the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
hospital.
yeah.
And it only takes away from it anyway. So, yeah, agreed. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Deirdre, Harvey.
Yeah, thanks very much. I suppose I just wanted a bit on the Dundonald House and DFC. Is there discussions around what the use of that would be, or?
It would be probably more how do we deal with the building? It's back to whether or not there is any way that we can demolish the building.
Okay, no worries. The other wee bit was just around how the strategy overall aligns with community asset transfer and what engagements or alignment you have with local councils in terms of local development plans. So on the one hand, yes, it's important to engage the private sector, and sometimes that's around speculative development, but what can we do, or what is being done in terms of aligning with more social outputs? So obviously that challenge between value for money, but also community impact. And I'm keen to see, is there more work to be done in that area? Or I know you've given some examples of Castledurg and Ardoyne, Jamaica Street and stuff. But, you know, do you sit and look at local development plans that councils are developing in terms of housing-led regeneration, particularly in the likes of Belfast City Centre? And are there creative ways that we can look at the whole area around value for money? And repurposing some of those old buildings then in terms of regenerating. And I'm keen around not just the private sector, but looking at, I suppose, plural community ownership models, or even partnerships with communities and with local councils.
Right. Well, Tracy might want to comment on it, but just say that when any of our properties that we don't really have land, we only have land where it's associated with buildings, like here or in Ballymena or somewhere like that. So we don't have land. When any of our buildings are being disposed of, they automatically go through the D1 process, and the D1 process then takes you into the community side.
Yeah, the community side of things. And the first stage of that process is that it is offered out. But if there is no interest from a particular community, you know, in terms of an asset transfer, then the next step of that process is for it to go to the open market. So that is the first part of the process, is that is what happens. It goes out internally, and where there is interest, then that is pursued. We don't make the decisions. The departments, who as the asset owner, will make that decision. And, you know, in terms of the value piece, which you've picked up, is the law currently does prioritise market value. You know, we're driven to find best value for the public purse, and that's the binding constraint that we all have to work under. CATs do proceed. There have been a number of them in recent years, but it is mostly at market value and under the current framework, and that's the D1 process.
Are there examples elsewhere on these islands where there's a difference in legislation that looks at social value and stuff as well, or regeneration value, not just the market value? Is there any, are you aware? Or
I'm not aware of anything specific. It's a very difficult one to manage, and I know in the context of social value, the Stormont Act is one of the constraints around, particularly since we've got to deliver that best value.
I just from looking at it from outside, I'm no expert in this area at all, but I think Scotland is probably the best example of doing something. And certainly I find it difficult to see how without legislative change we're going to move ahead, because the Stormont Act looks, 1933 Act looks for best price, and it's very, very hard to whatever the right phrase is, disapply the Stormont Act.
Okay, and the other bit was just around the D1 process then. Has there been any assessment from the community's perspective of issues or challenges, or even, I suppose, the pace at which these things come forward, and the ability, I suppose, within communities or local councils to be ready when there's a disposal? I mean, have you faced any challenges or barriers that they have in terms of that process in of itself?
Yeah. I don't know whether you want to come in. I've only been here since March, so I can't talk to what's gone before.
Yeah, we've done a review of the disposal guidance fairly recently, and I think the new guidance came out in June last year. One of the perceived barriers was the requirement for third sector organisations to have compulsory purchase powers. So we have removed that barrier. So the internal market now has two strands to it. It's only right that if a property exists within the public sector, that the public sector get the opportunity to reuse and repurpose that. So the first strand to the internal market is to the public sector. If there's no public sector interest, then we circulate to the third sector organisations, to TSOs, and they're represented by DTNI, Development Trusts Northern Ireland, who act in their behalf, so they can come in at that point to the disposal process. And then, as Tracy has said, if there's no general public sector interest or TSO interest, it goes to the external market. So we have looked at barriers and issues. It's difficult because sometimes as LPS we don't know that something is coming to the market until a submission is made into the D1 process. So it is difficult for us sometimes to be able to timeline things. The guidance itself gives relatively tight guidelines in terms of that circulation, any expressions of interest that are made as a result of that. We try and make sure that that process runs to time, but we're only the facilitators of that process, and it's up to asset owners to determine if they have an interest. They are able to extend those timelines if they feel that there's an interest there, but they may be lacking some information that they request. So it is possible for those timelines to be extended, both for the, as I say, strand 1 and strand 2 of the internal market before it goes externally.
Are you satisfied that there's enough flexibility then in terms of looking at extensions, or would you prefer, or would you think it was helpful to have a longer lead-in time then, and an awareness that these assets are likely, to be disposed of by departments?
I think the problem is we're always trying to push for that value for money. So asset owners don't really want to sit on assets for a long period of time. They want to go through their decision-making process and then get them into the D1 process and try and expedite a sale. There are holding costs associated with surplus property. There are other social issues that result from vacant property. So it's incumbent from a value for money point of view on asset owners to try and expedite those sales. We went out to consultation on the new guidance, and I think whilst everybody would love a little bit more time to put things together, I think it is incumbent that we try and move through that process as quickly as we can. But there are those, I suppose, safeguards there that if there's interest, we can extend a timeline to allow those potential purchasers the opportunity to do their due diligence, to put their business cases together, to gather the information that they need to make the ultimate decision on whether they want to purchase or not.
Thank you.
It's also worth, Chair, it's also worth being aware that managing public money, NI, also on us as maybe as the representative of the asset owner, that we're required to try and divest as soon as we can.
You do?
Yes, sorry.
Just on there, there's a follow-up, just because I'm looking at a separate note we got from the Strategic Asset Management. The Strategic Asset, maybe I should just say SAMU. And I know we've had a couple of questions in this committee about how you interact with them or not in some ways. But the guidance we have, and Deirdre was asking about social value, and it says under the disposal policy, and I don't know if that's a policy owned by SAMU. The internal market is the first disposal pathway, meaning presumably the next, designed to maximise efficiency, deliver value for money, ensure surplus assets before progressing to the external market. But then it says to deliver value for money and ensure surplus assets are reused for public sector or community benefit. Yeah. So how does that say, if you have the tight structures of cost and going to the market? But Deirdre's asking, I think, a very reasonable question about social value. We've been told by SAMU that they effectively do have some kind of recourse to community benefit. Would you see, does that interact with what you're doing, or are you just very strictly governed by? Or am I misunderstanding? I know I'm kind of asking.
I think the SAMU, there's now a two-stage process. So the first stage, there's a two-stage internal process. I know this is an LPS question, so stop me if I'm... And the first stage is basically it's circulated around central government. Yeah. So departments, we have the opportunity first to see. The second step then is, it used to be all one stage. Second step is, after that, then it gets put around for the third sector organisations. Yeah. They get an opportunity then to say whether or not they want it. Now I think their timelines kick in at that point, so they are quite well, we would see them as probably a bit long. The third sector might see them as a bit short. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't have those timelines on the top of my head, but they're there so that the process can move reasonably quickly through, so that we're not spending months and months and months on one part of that process.
There's obviously, for the purposes of what is still a commercial transaction, it has to meet, rather than, for example, a community asset transfer. It's not. This isn't about. This is simply to dispose of it in a way that's still commercial, albeit they have not first but second refusal, if I'm understanding it.
Yes, so it's not just central government in that first strand. It's the whole of
public sector.
It's the whole of government. So it's local authority as well. Then it's the third sector organisations before we then take it to the open market. But in terms of, again, we are the facilitators in this process, and the asset owners have control and are the ultimate decision makers. So as we've alluded to, the legislation requires us to get best price, but if a potential purchaser comes along and says we're not prepared to pay that amount of money, the asset owner has to make the decision as to whether or not they're going to potentially accept something. The legislation, and as Desi alluded to, it is relatively specific in when you can disapply and when you can't.
That goes for, including like for Manor House, for example. It's not you. So you're advising they're still okay. I need to bring in Deputy Chair now.
Yeah, thank you all very much for coming. Sorry, I'm a little bit late at a meeting in the city centre, but I had it on in the car coming through my Bluetooth. So thank you very much. On your performance against just your KPIs, I really welcome the way you've set it out. I think that it's really good for us to see that where you've got a plan over a 6-year period, quite often these things drift, and it's very hard to see what is being achieved, but to be able to see whenever you're well progressed through it, those measurabilities, it is really, really good to have them set out. But I wonder, beyond the KPIs, is there a capture of whenever you come to the end of this 6-year period of this office estate, what has been saved? Because I know sometimes whenever you're reporting on the KPIs, it gets quite focused on them, but I would wonder, are we capturing just that full saving in terms of, for every property, it's not just saved once, it's saved every single year, the insurance, the car parking, your heat, just cleaning, just that general maintenance, because showing that you have progressed so much against them by divesting off the different buildings, reductions in rates in that area, you can see that move. But I would be really interested just to see that total figure at the end of the day, because quite often these things just progress, you're ticking off the KPIs, but I just think here in Northern Ireland we're not very good at recognising we made some savings here, to be able to pull that out and use that, because I think it is a good evidence base if it's being captured, to be able to present at a point in time on behalf of the Northern Ireland Public Services, to say look what we did make this huge proportion of savings and reform here.
Well, we capture that now. The problem, as you'll only be too well aware, is by the time we get all the financial data in, and it's all been through all the various validations, etc., it could be next year before we know it. The closest estimate I have at this point in time is that we're saving just in those running costs about £6.4 million a year. So, and that's since we started doing what we're doing.
Is that in actuals, or are you applying inflation to that? Because again,
no, that's actuals. We're not applying. We tend to be very, very conservative, so it doesn't look like we're overestimating anything. Now, there's lots of interesting points in there, because if you go across the KPIs, some of them, as you say, you're saving money year on year, and I've worked in strategies before where you put a cumulative graph and you show where it goes up to. And it's also interesting that we're collecting the data for the running cost, and that's 6.4 million of the last year. So for example, the like of Clarence Court was 1.1 million in the last year, but the year before that it was more, because it was occupied the year before. So I absolutely get what you say. We do keep that running total, but even that 6.4, I would have to say it hasn't been validated. It's an estimate. It's based on the last annual running costs of the building. So all those provisos are in there. But yeah, we do try and keep an eye on that.
Well, that's good, and I think that it is, important that it's not just focused on the KPIs, and you do capture that, because when you get to the end of these 6 years, so if you're saying 6.4 million, you know, you could be hitting £40 million there, you know, of savings, and it would be a shame to not have that, you know, acknowledged and recognised whenever so much work has gone into that.
Sorry, I think the other thing, I don't know if it was probably immediately before you come in, probably from the car to here, we're saying there is a review mechanism built in to the actual strategy, which should have been around about now, but we have paused that because we're in between grade 3s at the moment, so it'll be taken forward once our new grade 3's in and he has an opportunity to read himself into the whole background.
No, thank you very
Sorry
much.
for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then in terms of the disposals, some really substantial, you know, disposals and receipts coming in. It's my understanding that whenever those receipts come in, they kind of just go into the general pot. Or is there any plan to review that, or just focus it to reinvest in the office estate strategy? Because you're coming through, you're disposing of these assets, you're getting millions of pounds. It would, you know. Yeah. Is there any thinking that should then be going back into the office estate and reprofiling and doing more work that way?
I'll give you the company line here. Basically, that's how some property organisations work. Ours has tended to go into the centre unless there's a problem, in which case then we're left to carry the risk of getting the money in. But generally, typically, I couldn't really say to you, we brought in 16 million since we started doing this, 16.1 million, whatever, what that has been used for, because it goes into the pot and it's divvied out to probably greater needs than ours, frontline public services.
I think it's worth saying as well, that's not just on the receipts. Obviously, the savings that you mentioned, the savings are just taken off. So we don't get a proportion of the savings to reinvest in the existing estate. Yeah. They're just taken off. Yeah. So
it's probably, sorry, excuse me, shouldn't keep jumping in like this. Probably goes back to Mr. Kingston's point, how did we get here? If there was that level of reinvestment, but the budget is as the budget is, and we understand that.
No, it's just in terms of whenever the good work's going on, you're realising savings and efficiencies, you're getting the receipts in, we could some sort of a appraisal of the exercise to actually quantify that would be good. The chair had mentioned I had been asking a number of questions around the values of disposals compared to like the Red Book numbers, and you had answered him, but I just wanted to check. So whenever we see the values so different coming through from the Red Book and the disposals, it is quite concerning, and for me it's quite concerning because those are the values that the assets are actually held on our asset registers across the different departments, and there's a potential there, are they overinflated? Are these the values that are heading into people across Northern Ireland, their business and their personal rates bills? Is there
there's a difference in the valuation, and I'll hand over to Neil, but the basis of valuation for a Red Book valuation that we would undertake for a disposals market value, the value at which something is put into the books is different. So I'll let Neil, that's Neil's area.
Yeah, I don't want to get terribly technical around all of this, but yes, we're talking about three different things here. So at the point that a property comes into the D1 disposal, we'll do an estimate of market value, what we think it will make. Ultimately, that will sell, and that will be its sale price, and that will be its true market value because it's been exposed to the market. But when we do a valuation for accounting purposes, we're under a completely different set of standards. And in the public sector, the measurement of an asset is its current value in existing use. That's an accounting measurement principle. From a valuation point of view, the mechanism to deliver that current value in existing use is existing use value, but it differs from market value. So existing use value is really a measurement of the service potential of a building, not what the market would pay for that building. The market will pay its highest and best use, whereas existing use value will only reflect what the replacement of that service potential may well cost.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to, you had referred to it in response to a number of people, it's old legislation that we're dealing with, in terms of best value for disposal, and for yourselves as you're applying it, and for us to scrutinise it, really the only thing you can scrutinise is well, this is what the valuation says and this is what you sold it at. So it's hopefully fair enough for you to see why we're asking, you know, those questions, because it's what's being used and it does look different at the face of it.
And I think you also need as well, you know, those valuations are appointed in time, and very often those disposals may not come to fruition, or we may not have been asked for an updated valuation, and we tend to say that you would need to update that at least every 6 months. But if you look at some of the dates, you know, it could be 2 years down the line before another department has taken a decision to dispose of something, or it has worked its way through the process. So I can see and totally understand the need to challenge. It's just that understanding of, you know, what the definition is, and then ultimately once it's on the open market, at least that's its best test in terms of what it's worth.
And then your KPIs are all around, you know, the reduction of the office estate. I just wanted to ask, in keeping with Gemma's theme of local politics, is there any, you know, strategic plans or reviews for opportunities if something were to arise in, you know, wider Northern Ireland, rural Northern Ireland, anywhere that you haven't got actually a premise, like a presence in terms of the civil service office estate? Is there anything to do with that?
We tend to provide accommodation where departments tell us that they need the accommodation. So if somebody says we need something in wherever, then we'll see what is in the market there. But we don't move people in the sense that we wouldn't move them into another area. When we're consolidating, we consolidate people in the area that they're in.
And just one wee final one. So whenever you're reducing your office space, and you had outlined a lot of people are now in the hybrid work and they're working from home, you're not necessarily displacing or moving people, but would there be a degree of people who have been relocated from one office place to another, and, you know, are there payments to those people for, you know, the inconvenience of the travel? Is there a degree of that going on, or would that sit with yourselves? Would that be more of an HR issue?
That would be an HR issue, but typically it would be...
It's basically excess fares, but it has to be more than 3 miles to trigger it. Obviously, if, as Desi says, when we're consolidating, we're normally consolidating inside an area, so often that isn't triggered. If it is triggered, then it's a cost. But again, if you're into the 40% attendance, well, it's only the 2 days out of 5 people, because you're not going to be paid the days you're not there for that and that's the lowest cost of getting from one premises to another, which might be a bus cost, or it might be that's how the excess fares is worked out. So
and the person, it would be fairly difficult probably to work it out, because somebody could be moved closer to home. Yeah. Even though, you know, it's 3 miles difference, but it is closer to home. Somebody can be further away.
It also only applies for 3 years. For the point, so after 3 years it falls away.
But it is worth saying that all of our consolidation projects, we engage with the departments and fully to make sure that they're content. We engage with the staff in the buildings, and then we also agree with the TUS, trade union side as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. And again, thanks for coming and for the updates. And I look forward to just keeping on top of this, and hopefully we'll see more of the greens coming through on your KPIs. But thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go into closed session in a second, I think, just to get a bit of detail on the Dundonald House matter that we talked about for our information. Before we go, one question which has always troubled me about this, which is, I give a personal view on this. I think it's really important to do two principles in relation to the office estate. Unqualified politician, but obviously that doesn't stop us bloviating about anything and everything. But in relation to Belfast, I'm obviously a Belfast rep, but I think we want to have as much of the ability of people to work in towns and a civil service presence, and particularly in market towns, that could use that extra employment and that extra presence, and that makes sense and is welcome. But for those jobs that are in Belfast, I have to say, it just seems logical to me that they would be in Belfast city centre, where they can be, because number one, that actually is part of the broader climate obligations in terms of making it easier for people to use active travel, walk, and some people are lucky enough to be able to, within walking distance, use a bike, obviously, walk or wheel, but also use public transport closer to bus and train stations. It doesn't seem to me that that's a particular focus of the disposal strategy. So, for example, Clarence Court, now I know there are issues with Clarence Court around, you know, being a somewhat dated kind of building, but it's not that old, and it is right in the middle of Belfast. Would it not be better to, no offence to Stormont, it's a very nice old kind of compound that we're in, the edge of Belfast, wouldn't it not be just better and more strategic and more economically valuable to have any civil servants who are in Belfast by default should really be in the city centre where they can spend money and use public transport?
I wouldn't disagree with you, but I suspect that might be a political matter, which I wouldn't want to get too far into. But certainly the like of Clarence Court, for example, Clarence Court would have cost us something like 40 million to rent. Now that's what, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
That was an uplift from a previous one. So it was 33 million, then uplifted to 42 million, and then who knows what it would be now. So I know you're just talking in general principles rather than in specifics.
That's not a specific policy intent. I think it's fair to say that there's no specific policy intent that people should be, that the economic value and the sustainability benefits should be factors. No, that's not a specific.
Well, the people in Clarence Court stayed in Belfast city centre. They didn't go. They went to James House, so they didn't go out of the city centre, and they didn't come off a bus route as such. Yeah. So we do try to make sure that they're kept within the same geographic location.
I suppose I'm asking as a general policy decision. There's no particular preference for those in Belfast. I'm not saying there should be more in Belfast relative to the regions, because I think there's a strong argument for having more people out in Ballymena, Downpatrick, Omagh, whatever. Yeah. But for those who are in Belfast, it is better to have more in the city centre, surely.
So some of the organisations we would deal with, the departments, they would have a preference where their staff are going to be located. And I would say that 9 times out of 10, if it's going to be Belfast, they're going to look for Belfast city centre. So
it depends on the nature of the function. Because I'm thinking of, for example, as Desi said, especially if there's a lot of admin type jobs that people are, when they're in the office, those are ideal to be based in the city centre where you've got that transport. But functions that are maybe, I'm thinking DFI colleagues where they were on the roads and they were going, we've had issues where actively they did not want to be moved into the city centre because it didn't work for them. They needed access to their transport. So there is that kind of
I get that if people are in the road service and they want to get out to a site, it's quicker to get out of, it's quicker to get on the Newton Ards Road and on the Ring Road and out to wherever you're going than on the motorway than crawl into the city centre. It's just something that's occurred to me. I just personally think there's hundreds of people working here at Stormont, including people in this building, who can't ever, they can't buy food. Obviously, they do sell food in these estates, but there'd be so much more added value for businesses if they're in. I'm sure Belfast Chamber would agree.
I think the primary driver has to be the service that you're delivering. So if you think about your JBOs, which we mentioned,
absolutely,
there's a need for them to be exactly where they are.
Okay, well that was just a hobby horse of mine. We're going to go into closed session if we can to talk about this Dundonald House issue.
Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate.
I'll formally say thank you when we go back into open session. But thank you informally.
That's it. Back in, Chair.
Okay, members, we're back in open session now. Just to say thank you to the officials who give us the briefing on the state strategy. We got some. We went into closed session just to get a couple of points of information that they thought best in closed session relating to the security of the Dundonald House site. I think suffice to say, in broad terms, we're all slightly concerned about the long-term future of Dundonald House and what potential use it can be put to, and what the strategy is for putting it to any use, given the cost and potentially other limitations. But I think it would be one for us to keep to ask them to be kept abreast of. They told us, they had indicated there were further advice had just gone to ministers. I think we'd like to be kept abreast of developments in that, specifically in relation to Dundonald House. I think because it is such a vast building, vast potential liability, and if the only viable strategy is to just let it kind of decline and go derelict, I think that's not acceptable. So, but anyway, otherwise we thank them for their evidence. Now, members, we're going to go on to agenda item 4. I don't think there are any other things we needed from you. I think that's it.
No, Chair, that was it.
We're going to go on to agenda item 4, which is the SL1 Whole of Government Accounts Designation of Bodies Order Northern Ireland 2026. The paper for this is at page 87 of the meeting pack, and the clerk's memo is at page 87.2. A copy of the SL1 letter, from the department is page 90. The draft SR Whole of Government Accounts Designation of Bodies Orders at page 93, and an explanatory memorandum for the draft SR is at page 100. Members, the purpose of this statutory rule is an annual device which allows the department to collect information from specified local bodies and share with the Treasury to support the preparation of the UK-wide Whole of Government Accounts. It's subject to negative resolution. It was published in Citizen Space and no responses were agreed, came back to us. So members, this is relatively routine, so can I ask if people are content with the proposal of the SR? Content?
Thank you.
Members are agreed that if there's any agreed action, no, if there's any agreed action, we're content to publish the committee's decision and go back to the department on that basis. That's confirmed. Agenda item 5 is SR 2690, the Valuation, Telecommunications, Natural Gas and Water Amendment Regulations, NI 2026. The department has formally laid a statutory rule, SR 2026-90, the Valuation, Telecommunications, Natural Gas and Water Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2026, which will amend the same regulations from 2010 and will replace or revise names of gas transplantation companies listed in the 2010 regulations. The rule is subject to negative resolutions due to come into operation the 8th of June this year. At its meeting on the 15th of April, we agreed that we were content with the policy proposal. The department said there's no changes since then. There's a clerk's cover note, page 103, further details at page 106. The examiner statutory rules has not yet reported on the rule, but we can still consider this and agree this rule subject to the advice. If it comes back, we can revisit it. If it comes back and there is something surprising and concerning, we can revisit this. But members, does anybody have any questions about this draft SR? It is the same one where we kind of basically update the names of utilities companies every year. It is extremely routine. Well, if we're content, then I'll put the question. The Committee for Finances considered SR 2026-90, the Valuation, Telecommunications, Natural Gas and Water Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2026. Subject to the ESR report, is no objection to the rule. Agreed? Agreed. Agenda item 6, outturn and forecast, outturn written briefing. Members, this wasn't in the with us. We obviously, we were due to have this for last week's meeting. It wasn't with us. We then got it for the very delayed basis, and it was in the second iteration of the tabled pack, so thank you to the clerks for chasing it and sending it along. The papers begin at page 3 of the tabled pack for the outturn and forecast outturn for for March. This is the restated March position for round 13. We agreed it, as I say, it was received late and it was forwarded to other statutory committees and the Assembly Audit Committee. As usual, the department has reported in 4 expenditure categories: ring-fenced, DEL, non-ring-fenced, DEL, capital DEL and FTC, with the usual tables broken down. The department has highlighted that this is a restated March position. It does not reflect the department's provisional outturn positions, which will be reported later, but in practice there are rarely any significant stated positions between the two. So on non-ring fence DEL, there's a total easement of 24.7 million. The adjusted easement after excluding the just under 4 million relating to Treasury earmarked funding for the NI protocol and transformation is 20.4 million. Just to be clear, that relates to does that relate to the transformation funding that was unspent as part of the PTSB?
The easement, yeah.
Okay, the transformation fund. The department indicate that it is expected that the majority of departmental underspend will be offset by a pressure at the centre. It would be helpful to know what that pressure is if it's not in our paper. Which, reflecting lower than previously forecast regional rates income. I should have just read the next part of the sentence before asking that question. Well, I'm happy to admit my mistakes.
We usually do.
All right, Chair, it happens to us all.
Full departmental positions are detailed in Annex A at page 12 of the table pack. Departments are reporting an easement of 226 million in ring fence resource DEL, of which 183 million relates to student loan impairment, which is a perennial issue, and 43 million an issue, an accounting issue rather than one that's hugely substantive, and 43 million relating to depreciation and impairment costs. This funding can only be used for non-cash costs relating to depreciation and impairments and not used for any other purpose. Departmental positions are set at Annex B at page 22 of the table pack. In relation to capital DEL, departments are reporting a total easement of 13.2 million in capital DEL. The adjusted easement after excluding 0.2 million for the NI protocol is 13 million. Capital DEL positions are set out at Annex C, page 32 of the table pack. For FTC, there is an easement of 1.1 million. So members, expectation of variances exceeding the threshold of 5% and 250k compared to the March position can be found at Annex C at page 48. Now, there's a couple of things which strike me. Please do indicate, members, if you wish to make any comment on this. First of all, it's welcome we have this, albeit belatedly. The bulk of the non-ring-fenced DEL easement appears to relate to transformation funding. So it would be helpful just to absolutely clarify for the purposes of, for our information, that this relates to a public sector transformation board project. And I just think it would be helpful to, because it just says generically transformation, but it doesn't say a specific allocation and project which was agreed by the Public Sector Transformation Board. I think it would be helpful to find that out. It would also, I think, be helpful to establish, because it isn't totally clear, what the specific, unless I can see it here, the specific, maybe it is here. What is specifically driving the easement in capital? Anyway, but other than that, I'll bring in other members. Deputy Chair, do you want to come in with that?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really, really good to have this. I know we had chased it a little bit, and I just think that it is important. If we're not asking for it and chasing it as Finance Committee, I don't really think anybody else is getting it through into their committees either. So it was good to see it come through here, and we had it in Economy Committee this morning, and have been able then through that committee to ask the specific questions on that department, because nobody's better placed than each of the individual statutory committees to look at these numbers and challenge what they actually mean and if they make sense. But no, support the chair in terms of seeking that little bit more clarity on it, and it will be good whenever we get the final figures and are able to ask a few questions on it. And I suppose like next week, we have the minister and things, so we can iron out the queries around then. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Steve Aiken.
Yeah, no, it's just I'll just follow up from the Deputy Chair. I want to go through the figures in much more detail and sort of have a look at it, but it's interesting sort of between the student loan impairment and the transformation fund money and the way it's shifting around. There's a bit of, I think as our Deputy Chair would understand, a wee bit of creative usage of figures to massage the overall outcome. Just want to have a closer look at it. It just seems to be that every time we get sort of these figures that come through, the adjustments tend to sometimes make it a bit more favourable. But as I say, I need to look at it a bit more closely to come to come any more detail on that, and I have to sort of scan through I have to look at the figures in detail just to come up with that. And so, regrettably, I haven't had the chance to give it its full SP yet. But I would fully agree with what the black arts of the deputy chairs, I think, is probably in use.
It's just accountancy, but anyway. We're not
you said it, Chair, not me.
Brian Kingston.
Well, just at point 10 in the report, page 6, for the finance department, it says an outturn or underspend of 1.2 million arising from delays in integrate delivery and difficulties filling vacancies. You just furthered our visit last month to Goodwood House. I think it was where we were being sold the benefits of integrate. I mean, and I think it was it £14 million a year. It's meant to bring about savings at quite a high cost. Just, I'd like to get more information on that delays. I mean, this is meant to be a flagship project of the department relating to finance and HR services. So, if we can get why. Well, I don't know what that means. 1.2 million rising from delays in integrate delivery and difficulties filling vacancies. What are the delays in delivery? It's still been ruled out, or I think because it's still a project being developed. But anyway, I'd be interested in more information on that. Whether we can request that for more explanation, and yeah, for an update of how is it comparing to the target dates for delivery? Is it falling behind?
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We'll ask for that, and specifically the information, because they didn't elaborate on it, but on the non-ring fenced L, whether that if that is a specific transformation fund project. Okay. Members are happy enough. We'll then go on to. We're going to have a brief chat about the inquiry on the performance and culture of NICS. If members are agreed, we'll have Hansard report this, because it's part of our committee inquiry. They're not here, but they'll do it from the recording. So members, at page 112 of the meeting pack, you'll find a series of papers. There is a news article on our briefing last week. There is results of the NICS People Survey. Results of the NICS People Survey. Correspondence from the Economy Committee regarding the AI strategy for the public sector here at page 195. And those are new things. Obviously, we will be able to ask the Minister. I'm sure he and his officials are expecting us to raise this, given it's clear that this is one of our priority areas. So I suppose members asking for reflections about the results of the People Survey. The correspondence we've also had from the Economy Committee is interesting. I mean, I would just make the point. I think it was welcome that we had the evidence session last week. I have to say, and I mean this in the nicest possible way. I wasn't entirely. I didn't emerge from that evidence session any clearer about what the key priorities are for reforming the civil service, and I say that with the best will in the world and without trying to be.
I think I would echo your comments, Chair.
I didn't find that a particularly clear or enlightening session, though I understood some of the points that were being made. So I think we will want to, as a committee, interrogate a little bit more some of the points that came out of that session. I think I had a particular concern about reporting lines and the ownership of delivery of civil service change and civil service reform. And I think some of the concerns that I personally went into that session with were kind of, in a sense, magnified or even greater afterwards than they were before. But I'll bring in the Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I would agree with your analysis from last week. We have this inquiry, it's this committee's inquiry, and it's the performance and culture of the Northern Ireland Civil Service. It's not a review of HR in the civil service, which it felt very much like it was being pushed back onto us, and and referred to those HR officials who we did have in on a separate session, and the people survey and the HR piece is a very important part of our inquiry. But we were trying to get to some of the structure, some of the management, some of the higher level things from the head of the civil service, and I just didn't feel like it was grasped or just taken on board that that's where we were coming from. It wasn't just all about HR, and I don't know what else we can do in terms of this inquiry, just to look at it as a body, its structure as a whole. Suppose maybe some of the external reviews of how the operation how it's run and what happens within it is something that we can do. But I certainly felt from last week there's some very clear recommendations coming through just from that general tone as to the answer is not just this people's strategy, it's how the whole service, the system, the reporting lines, the accountability, how everything is run. And I think there's a lot of value that we can add by maybe just shining a little bit of light on that I think everyone's doing their best, and I think the HR team are doing their best, and they've 24,000 staff, and it is a big job to do that HR management, and it's all important, but there's so much more to what it is that we're trying to do and say here in terms of the delivery of public sector. But it's good to see it getting picked up and our inquiry getting picked up and a bit of media coverage around it, because it shows that we are scrutinising here effectively.
And I should just say, I think Gilman and Captain Shannon, to be fair to them, came along and have given evidence to us before and have been pretty consistent around some of the, we will definitely want to interrogate and test, and I'm sure we still have some concerns, but in fairness they were able to, there are consistent actions they are pursuing, and they've never not been upfront about some of the structural issues around that they have to deal with, but they were at least upfront and consistent. One suggested action, members, and it's one that I didn't discuss in advance with the clerk, apologies for that, is it may be that given some of what we want to look at is the broader cultural stuff, if I could maybe suggest the clerk team go away and have a look at it, may be that we would benefit from a kind of longer view from some perhaps people who were in senior roles in the civil service. I don't know who those people would be, I don't have a list of, but it might be they would be able to give us a little bit of a viewpoint of how some of this stuff worked in the past. So for example, one of the things we heard was that that some of these structures changed in 98, possibly for understandable reasons, or changed maybe post 98. It might be helpful to understand a bit of the historical context. So members might just ask, we wouldn't need to agree it now who we invite, but if the clerk team would go and have a look at some potential other witnesses, we obviously have a fair bit of time to this, including if members are amenable with that, just when we can obviously agree who those invitees would be, or those potential witnesses. If we agreed with that, we can go and look at who those people might be. I don't know if anybody else wants to reflect on any of that. No? Okay. Well, in that case, we are still, I think, outstanding. There's a couple of bits of information we asked for in last week's evidence session, but also we had expressed a concern about this NISRA data, that we are, I think we still don't have a clear answer on who's picking that up or whether it will be picked up. Yeah.
We went back for further detail on that, Chair.
Okay. Grand. Okay. Well, we will hear more about that, and we will have a bit of we'll have further information about, or suggestions about who we could invite to give us evidence and to give us a sort of longer view. And we'll obviously have the Minister in front of us next week, and he might have some views to give us. Okay, members. If you're content, we will. Sorry. Yes, you're going to tell me to do what I'm about to do. Don't worry. I'm not as remiss as you think I am all the time. Great. Members agreed that we'll add the people survey and the evidence base to the inquiry. Are we happy enough with that?
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. I also said that people surveys at page 185. I think it's actually page 1. No, it is at 185. No, it's at 120.
There are three, Chair. There's a 2025, 2023 and 2021, so they'd like us to do it every 2 years.
Okay, right. Now, members, we're going to move on to Agenda Item 8, which is the Marriage and Civil Partnerships Bill. Just as before, Hansard will report this, but they're not sitting here, so they'll come back to us with, I presume, with the volume of legislation going through. They're probably going through quite a lot of demands on their time.
They review the video, Chair.
Okay, so members, that's at page 212 of the meeting pack. You will see correspondence from the Northern Ireland Humanists providing a briefing on the Marriage and Civil Partnership Bill. They have a concern about the lack of criteria on what constitutes a genuine religious or humanist group. If members are agreed, we will get an oral briefing with NI Humanists. If we're agreed with that, we'll hear from them. And we will forward the briefing paper to the Department of Finance for comment on any points raised. Okay? I think that's useful. Anyone else wants to come in on that? No? Okay. Now, so members, we have a correspondence from the Minister of Finance, which is regarding plenary attendance on next week on the 1st of June, and in that he informs the Assembly that he will be unavailable for further plenary proceedings on Monday the 2nd of June after question time. That's fair enough. I mean, given he will be there for question time, but then not afterwards, I think is what we're being told. It's okay. We can ask some questions there. 9.2 is a written ministerial statement from the First and Deputy First Minister. It relates to the it relates to the response to the COVID-19 public inquiry. It's just for us to note. We're going to go on the table pack now, and we have an oral statement from the Finance Minister on tranche 2 announcement of the Transformation Fund, which came through yesterday, on Monday. No, yesterday was Tuesday, sorry, it was bank holiday. That's page 51 of the tabled pack. So members, I mean, in relation to that, I think there are clearly interesting and welcome in some cases bits of funding that have been announced. I think one bit of information that I would like, that struck me on reading the WMS yesterday is the oral statement is that the some of what was I'm not sorry, I'm just trying to find the relevant thing, that's why I'm mumbling. There was an employability support package that was announced by the Minister yesterday. That's it, excuse me. 16 million to the Department of Communities for its Pathway to Work and Wellbeing proposal. Together with the contribution from DFC, this is the successful transformation bid, it will deliver a redesigned health and work model, support for 3,700 people to improve work and wellbeing, a commission on work and wellbeing, a shift to early intervention. Now, members, I'm personally interested in how that differs from what was previously funded by Shared Prosperity and some of what is being moved to local growth. So I would like, given that there was a particular issue that we raised and raised on multiple occasions, I'm intrigued to understand the difference between this model and what was not funded, the money that was lost to that sector. And clearly the UK government had the primary part of that. I certainly made criticisms of the executive about how that was handled, but it now appears on the surface that the executive is, after all, funding a similar amount of money to do a similar type of thing. So I'd like to understand what's different and why this funding, how this funding differs. And obviously we can copy that correspondence to the Communities Committee if members are agreed, and indeed the Economy Committee. I just think we need to understand, given how much we talked here about this lost funding under local Shared Prosperity transition to local growth, and now which was basically for employability money, and we told the sector were up in arms. People weren't just put in protective notice; they were made redundant. Many of them were made redundant. Now we have an entirely new project, which I'm aware they've all been dragged into co-design, having just lost a relatively similar amount of money to do a similar type of thing. So I'd just like to understand the executive's explanation as to why these two things are different. Yep, Deputy Chair.
Thank you. Also on just the transformation fund, as the decision making has moved across sort of the TEO, yet the statement has come out through the Minister of Finance. I wonder, could we, I know we've been a bit back and forward on it before, but I wonder, could we just seek full clarity on what the role of the Finance Minister is in terms of this transformation fund? I had asked in the Chamber just for details of in relation to the item in correspondence, the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee saying how money was surrendered back for both 25-26 and the 26-27 estimates with regard to the transformation fund, just the quantifications around that, what the implications are. And I know the Minister said we'll definitely get it, but are we totally assured that we are going to get it? We've seen these things happen before whenever money hasn't come through quick enough in the right way. So I just would be keen to know, in terms of us and our scrutiny, because whenever I've asked a few things, it keeps getting bounced back. Transformation fund is TEO, but if it's the administration of the money, I think that somebody needs to be keeping a close eye on it, so I wouldn't want to see it drop through the cracks.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Okay. If no other members want to come in on that, we'll go to 9.4, which is Scottish Parliament, the appointment of presiding officers. So Kenneth Gibson, MSP, who was previously chair of the Scottish Finance Committee and engaged with us in the Interparliamentary Forum. Indeed, came here to Parliament Buildings to participate in it. He's become the presiding officer, i.e. the Speaker of the Scottish Parliament. So if members are agreed, we'll write him a congratulatory letter just to wish him all the best. Agenda item 10, draft minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of May. If members are content that they are a true reflection, page 221, I will sign them. Yep, okay. Agenda item 11, matters arising. So 11.1 is the our requests, the extract requests made on the 6th of May, and below are the responses, starting with 11.2, which relates to petroleum export licensing bill. That's at page 235. Following a call for evidence from the Economy Committee, we asked the Department of Finance if there was any policy locus in the bill's provisions. The Department has indicated it is no direct policy remit. However, it has an indirect interest in terms of wider economic considerations and alignment with executive priority, including climate and energy policy. Intriguingly expansive, and from my perspective, that's a good thing from the Finance Department. But that's to note. We might come back to that the next time they say not our problem.
We need to agree to send that.
If we'll send it, if people are agreed, we'll send that to the Economy Committee. The Department's response, yeah. Right, now the next is another Dáil Reader response on the 6th of May in relation to the utility regulator support for decarbonisation preparation bill. So that is at page 236 of the meeting pack. Following a call for evidence from the Economy Committee, we asked the Department of Finance if there are any policy locus in that bill. The Department has indicated there may be some some implications for the public purse, and that any additional expenditure should in the first instance be met by the sponsoring department. The Department has no direct policy remit in relation to the provisions of the bill. However, it is a relevant interest in several related policy areas, including building regulations, energy performance certification for public buildings, energy and emissions. It is anticipated there will be arrangements in place so that DOF officials can draw on the support and engagement from the utility regulator's new function. So we'll respond to the Economy Committee on that basis, if members are agreed. 11.4, national population projections for Northern Ireland. That's page 237 of the meeting pack. Following an oral briefing on the 29th of April, members asked about the population projections from NISRA. Further details have now been provided about how population change and ageing population compares to other countries nearby in these islands. The statistical bulletin providing the population projections for NI between mid-24 and mid-2049 is provided to us, and it's fairly stark for Northern Ireland. So I think we have, if I'm right in saying it, the sharpest, possibly slightly less sharp than Wales. The sharpest, no, I think we do actually have the sharpest increase in average age which goes from the current average age is 40.3 years. It was 40.3 years in 2024, and it'll go to 43.7 years in mid 2034. That's a sharper increase than anywhere else in these islands. Anyway, I think it is pretty stark. I think we should reiterate this point pretty consistently, because it's one of the biggest policy contextual issues that any jurisdiction faces, and we should be talking about it and all the consequences of it. That we have aging populations in general, which is a sensitive thing because people are living longer, but it also creates policy challenges we're all going to have to think about, and ours are sharper than Scotland, Wales, the south of Ireland, and everywhere. Deirdre?
Just it'd be useful to share this with other committees
Yes, it
in
would.
terms of their planning, as you say, looking forward, so it'd be useful for them to have.
Yeah, we are, and we're also projected that among the largest populations of those aged over 85 across the UK and Ireland by 2062. Okay, so I think we should share that for others. And okay, right, now the next few items are connected. 11.5 relates to the budget for the Northern Ireland Audit Office. It's at page 268. 11.6 is an Assembly written question which was submitted by the Deputy Chair in relation to the June monitoring process, which probably will not happen if there's not an agreed budget. It'll have to be a fairly quick process to agree a budget and then do a June monitoring round. 11.7, 11.8 is correspondence from the NI Affairs Committee about the absence of an agreed executive budget. I'll just run through all three of them, then members can comment. We obviously also have the correspondence. We got the full correspondence last week in time for last week's meeting to discuss it. The full correspondence from the PermSec, from Neil Gibson, that went to other departments. Not an actual Dear Accounting Officer letter, but in effect the same thing, or it had guidance to effect to departmental accounting officers. So the NIAO has written to this committee to express concerns in relation to the absence of an agreed executive budget. Appended to the letter is a copy of guidance issued by the Department of Finance to NI departmental accounting officers. This is the letter referred to by the Minister during the recent budget motion debate. That's not quite a DAO letter. Then the written question from the Deputy Chair, it was just said, indicates that whether there will be a June monitoring round relates to whether there's an agreed budget, which also relates to whether then there's obviously a main budget bill and a main estimates document, and then the final letter relates to is our letters from the NI Affairs Committee at Westminster. In fairness to the NI Affairs Committee, they do write to the Secretary of State and are fairly robust in asking what exactly the UK government are doing to help facilitate that. We also agreed to write last week to the UK government as well as we copied in the NIAC, the NI Affairs Committee, as well as the NIO and the new CST. Or we wrote to the new CST copying in the NIO and the NI Affairs Committee and the Treasury Select Committee, urging an answer really on what they were doing. We haven't had an answer yet, I presume. No. So, members, on all of these, the upshot of all this is we don't have an executive budget, and it's not a political statement to say that this is an extremely concerning situation to be in part because we know that we will only be able to spend 95% of last year's budget if we don't have a full agreed executive budget. And that could include AMI as well, which is really concerning. That's the demand-led spend that includes benefits and welfare, and it's extremely concerning. Obviously, we'll have the Minister in front of us next week. It would be great if there was an agreed budget before then. It's right that we continue to be robust in asking for the UK government's position. They have a responsibility here. Whatever their position in relation to funding, they can't simply wash their hands of the situation. I would also say personally, it's extraordinarily concerning that we could be in a situation where responsibility is not taken for setting a budget here, and we effectively add on an actual cut, not just a lower settlement than we would like, an actual cut on last year's budget, which is what will have to happen if a budget isn't agreed. Anyway, I hope we know more by next week, and it would be great if we had a budget. But anyway, we'll bring the Deputy Chair. Oh, no, Brian, want to come in first?
Yep. Well, clearly we are in a difficult situation for our public finances, and I can understand that ministers don't want to agree a budget, which would result in, if they agree to a budget, then they have to implement a budget. And
if they don't agree to it, a budget will have to be implemented, which is 5% less than last year's budget.
Well, whilst we may not all agree, we should be supporting the executive, and lobbying for a greater settlement from Westminster, and that is where the attention should be, rather than agreeing a budget which would result in job cuts. Because if you agree a budget, you have to implement it. But it's not a situation any of us wants to see the Northern Ireland economy in, or for our public services. But that, I think that's where the focus should be, on getting the proper settlement from Westminster. In the letter from the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee, Chair Antonia Antoniazzi, I just want to, I'm not sure is that correct. I appreciate we've had the second announcement about the Transformation Fund. He talks about there being a significant underspend in the Public Sector Transformation Fund. I mean, I understand the announcement by the Minister yesterday was the remainder of the £235 million. So whether or not it was all spent at the stage they wanted, I'm not aware that there was actual money lost from it. I think that's the full allocation spent, is it not?
That's not the underspend. Underspend is spending out of the money in a project basis, as in spending the money on the stuff that was allocated in round one.
But this is the fund that he announced the rest of the allocation of funding to projects yesterday?
Yes, the underspend they are referring to is the relative underspend against profile of tranche one, which she's talking about.
Yeah. But has all the funding now been allocated from that fund?
Yes, so based on what was agreed in 2024, yes.
Yeah.
But that's different. Allocating the money is different from spending it.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't want that letter to create the impression that we weren't spending money on public sector transformation, because that is a priority, I think, for all parties. We see that invest to save approach.
It's not about creating the impression. It's a fact that it is relatively. I mean, the Minister admitted that himself, or acknowledged it. I mean, that the tranche one projects are underspent versus the profile.
But funding surrendered to the Treasury. The funding hasn't been lost. The funding has been allocated, whether or not it wasn't spent at the relevant time. But I don't think funding has been lost, from that fund. I think the money is been spent. If you're talking about whether it's spent in year and at an early enough stage, but
I think Brian, just through the chair, that was what I had asked earlier. I think we were going to put in for some written confirmation around that money.
Around that easement and just exactly how that has worked.
So we asked DE, for example, on the easement, that was a public sector transformation easement. So we asked for confirmation about what that project, which of those projects it was. I should remember off the top of my head, but I can't.
Certainly, I put the question to the Minister yesterday that we should be making the case to Treasury for more funding for public sector transformation. So anyway, whether it's arguing about when the money is spent, but I don't think money has been lost to Northern Ireland, that was allocated to that fund.
Well, we will lose money if we don't agree a budget, and we can all agree about it. But if we don't agree, there will be a cut. There will be a 5% cut on last year's, and that's I think what we established. So we need to have that at the front of our minds too. Albeit it is clearly true that we need the UK government to engage with the Treasury, the Treasury specifically to engage in this and an agreement soon. So if we have the Minister in front of us next week, we can ask him these questions. Okay, thanks members. Now move on. Sorry, do I need to agree to something? Yes, we're going to share this to some. Oh yes, of course. So sorry members, we've already shared the Permanent Secretary's correspondence. We're also going to share the correspondence from the NI Affairs Committee to the Executive Office Committee. So 11.9 relates to the House of Lords NI Scrutiny Committee and the US administration's global reciprocal tariffs. They have copied us into a courtesy where they've asked the Minister of State for Trade about consequences in relation to the Windsor Framework and here NI. So they've copied us into the correspondence as a courtesy. 11.10 is the Administrative Financial Provisions Bill that relates to amendments that were tabled but not selected. agenda item 12 is correspondence. 12.1 is from the Communities Committee. It relates to the NI Place Name project. They wrote to the Minister of Finance about the NI Place Name project, and we've been copied in as per the protocol. So that's to note, unless anybody wishes to say anything about it. But 12.2, it relates to response from an individual on the MLA pay determination. Members will recall last week that we got an individual writing to us. The individual was informed this committee has no policy locus scrutinising the work of the Remuneration Board, and the individual has responded to us just to say, I don't think anybody would seek to curtail discussion, but we scrutinise executive spending, and the Remuneration Board is not something we have any locus in scrutinising. People are very entitled to have very strong views about MLA pay and to scrutinise it, and there are mechanisms to scrutinise it. It just isn't this committee. That's not to say it's not important, or people can't have strong views about it, and I understand they clearly do. Okay, now members, there's also correspondence from another individual who corresponds on a regular basis, and that will be put in the file, as with all the correspondence. 12.4 is from the Examiner of Statutory Rules, and there are no rules referenced in relation to us. Agenda item 13 is the draft forward work programme. That's at page 302. We have next week's oral briefing. Can I suggest that we do the pre-brief at 1:30? Or because we're starting?
We have the Minister scheduled for 2:30, so what we were going to suggest, Chair, was we do a pre-brief from 2 to 2:30.
Okay, so we start the session at 2:30?
Start the session with the Minister at 2:30.
Okay.
We only have the Minister for an hour.
Okay, so members, are we agreed? So first of all, let me go back. We have page 306 of the meeting pack. There's correspondence from the Economy Committee regarding a joint informal lunch with Trade NI. Is that the lunch we had some months ago? No?
Similar style.
And they want to do another one?
They want to do another one.
Okay. Sure, I mean, I think we can do that and schedule it, and if members wish to come and are able, they can attend, but it's not a three day.
Look to do that, Chair, mid to late September, so we're kind of putting it fairly far in the future.
Right.
Thank you.
Do you want to outline then, Clark, the other bits?
So, Chair, just what I was saying there about next week having the Minister, and we only have the Minister for an hour, so members may want to consider how they want to handle that. What we're suggesting is we have our normal start at 2, but the Minister's not coming to 2:30, so that gives members a half hour if they want to do a pre-prep session then. It means it's not going to kind of impinge on members' other activities and other committees and so on in the morning. Members might also want to consider whether they want to indicate to the department that they'd like to go straight to questions and dispense with a statement, or how they want to do that.
I say a couple of things. I think it's a bit. It's we want to make maximum use of time. I think we want as much time as possible. I think an hour is quite a short amount of time. I think we haven't had the Minister since before Christmas. I think we should say to the department that we would like more than an hour, unless there's a very, very pressing reason for us not to have more than an hour. I think in the absence of a budget, we need to be able to do our jobs diligently. I think the public would expect us to be able to, scrutinise exactly what's happening in the department. So I think we would like more than an hour if possible. But I guess quid pro quo of that is I think we should be able to say that the Minister should, of course, be able to make an opening statement. I don't want to. I don't think we, I wouldn't expect a half-hour presentation, but I think a courtesy to the committee, a courtesy from the committee would be, allowing the Minister to make a statement. Deirdre?
Yeah, I was just going to say, even depending on the time that's given, if we do go back for a brief opening statement, but I think it would be important to allow him to at least have a say, and then we can go to questions.
I don't think it's reasonable to go straight. I don't think we're reason to absolutely mandate. However, I do think the quid pro quo that is, we should have longer than an hour, and that I would like to ask the department to reflect on that, given the seriousness of the budgetary situation, and that we haven't had him in front of the committee since before Christmas. I think it does matter. Now, what I was going to suggest in terms of how we sequence it is, I don't believe in having really militating really structures, in part because I won't stick to them, and it'll put pressure on me as chair to remember things. But what I was going to suggest, we could do an initial round of questions on budget matters, do once round on budget matters, and then do separate round on basically any other business. That could be civil service reform, it could be public sector transformation stuff. But I think it would be helpful to do where we are with budget first, and then basically everything else. Are members content with that? Just so we have some kind of structure, and I think that will be useful for the Minister too. Steve?
Yeah, just through the chair. Previously, when we had, I think it was from Conor Murphy, who had a similar sort of thing, and he said he was only doing it for an hour. We went back to them and said, we have an hour of questioning after you've finished your opening statement, because, and I think that's normal course. It's also normal course in the Assembly when somebody's making a. So it might be worthwhile.
Well, I think our first, the first measure we'd like to ask for the maximum time possible, and then we'll go from there. But I do want to give the Minister the ability to make a statement. I think that's reasonable, within reason. And then, but if members are content that the broad way we'll approach it is have budget first, one round of the budget. I'm not going to tell it has to be on the multi-year budget or the June monitoring or whatever, but like the broad area of the budget, and then the next on other business, which could be. And by the way, we will want to cover in this session. Part of the reason why we need a good way into this is that we obviously need to cover. We do want to just get the Minister's position on civil service stuff that's come up. Our financial services inquiry. And actions out of that, and transformation. I think there are specific things that we'll want to cover in round 2, but if members are content, we'll have that budget first and then AOB. Happy enough? Okay, we'll do that, and then we'll meet here for a pre-brief at 2. Grand, and we'll publish that. Are there any other bits that you want to go through then for the rest of the session?
No, if members are agreed then to publish, that's perfect on that. There's really nothing else I want to flag up at the moment. So.
Grand, okay. Agenda 14, any other business? Yes, Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it was good to see the baby loss certificate regulations pass through the Assembly this week. And I just wondered, was there any more update in terms of the rollout, the launch, the event, or dates or anything around that?
We did go back to the department, and they didn't have a plan at that time, but they are very much aware of what could be done, and the committee's extreme interest in being involved in that, because the committee has had a significant role in making sure the certificates happen. So we're still looking at what might go on. We have our own plan in parallel to that as well, and we're communicating with stakeholders about how best to take that forward. But we will, as soon as we get something concrete, we'll let members know, because I appreciate a bit of notice is always helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, members, if there's no other business, I will we'll move to final line of business, which is adjournment. I'll put the question. Thank you very much, Deputy Chair. That's why more competent people than me surrounding me. The time and place the next meeting is here next week at 2 p.m. in the Senate chamber, and we'll put the question in the committee. Do now adjourn. The committee's adjourned.
Thank you.
Senate Chamber. Sound.